I want to talk to you this morning as a part 2 to a message that I started, probably 3 weeks ago, dealing with the story of the prodigal son that Jesus teaches in Luke chapter 15. And in teaching, don't worry, I'll write my points when I actually get to them because I want you to see them. There's something about seeing what I'm going to write down that brings an extrasensory element to the application of what we're going to do, which is why I have the board here this morning. We talked about the prodigal son, and we talked in the story of what Jesus is sharing. Just as a reminder, you really have to look at verse 1 and 2 of Luke chapter 15 to understand why Jesus is building the case of the two brothers and the story of the father, really, and the parable of the prodigal son that he gives us. And in Luke 15, 1 and 2, he touches on his audience being 4 different types of people. All right? 2 very similar, the other 2 very similar, but at different classes. The first ones that he mentions, he says that they were tax collectors and sinners that were present to hear his message. They were there to listen. The second classification of people that were present to hear him were Pharisees and scribes. And so you have the lower echelon of society that are kind of the strivers that are willing to cheat and steal to get ahead. And then you have those that are very self-righteous and very confident in their position based on who they are. And this is who Jesus is talking to. He is just amazing. Like, I know, like this, you could say this forever, and you're never going to get it across. Like, it doesn't do it justice. He is amazing at being able, listen, in his humanity and just being able to read his audience and see who is present and on the spot come up with a teaching that hits everyone where they need to be hit. Oh, give that gift to the church. Seriously. To be able to look into a situation, see the motivations of the heart, and be able to talk to them at their level to bring them into relationship with the Father. Come on. That's awesome. And this is what Jesus is doing. So we talked about the younger son. If you're not familiar with the story, there are 2 brothers. There's an older brother and there's a younger brother. And then the father being one of the, in my opinion, the main character of the whole story. And so we talked about the younger brother and the different things that went along with that. And basically, if you don't know the story, let me just reiterate it real quick. The younger brother decided he didn't want to live under the father's roof anymore. I know none of you can relate to that at all in any way, shape, or form. That never crossed your mind when you were 18, I know. But he wanted to leave the house, but he didn't want to just leave the house. He wanted to leave the house and get his inheritance from his father. That is legally permitted, but it is morally reprehensible. Because basically he's saying, I wish you were dead so I could get your stuff. Family dynamics, love and joy. Give me my inheritance so that I may go and spend it how I see fit with an independent heart that's not willing to submit and come underneath your roof, because physically, even though I'm here, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, I'm already gone and out there. Right? What does the father do? Gives it to him. And you go, hold the phone. He gives it to him? Yes, because there's this thing called free will. And the father is not going to force on you something that you are not choosing yourself. So he honors the son's request, gives him the finances. The son goes out into the world, wastes away all of his stuff, and at that time a famine hits the land. There's no food. He's sitting there kind of destitute, and he ends up working at a Gentile's home, feeding pigs and longing to eat what the pigs ate. So you have a Jewish young man that has come to the end of his rope, where he is now associating with the unclean thing, desiring to eat the unclean thing, the thing that the unclean thing would eat. That's low. And the Bible says he came to his senses. Really? Really? That's the no-duh moment that we're all looking for. Whew, he wanted to get rich while neglecting relationship. This is what it says in Luke 15, 17 through 20. It says, but when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have more than enough bread, and I am dying here with hunger? I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy. There it is. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired men. So he got up and came to his father. He worked out a scenario to be able to convince his dad to let him back into the house, but not at the level that he was before, at a lower level that he would be able to work to prove himself to be worthy to the house. This is what we call that. Especially in charismatic circles. This is the label that we put on it. The orphan spirit. We love to throw the word spirit into everything, right? So you can also put mentality beside that. I will prove myself to my father that I am at least worth being a worker in his house. He's a son. But because of what he has done, he no longer feels, everyone say feels worthy to be accepted into his dad's house. So he's going to go to his father because he knows his dad is a good man. He knows his father is good. And so he's going to show up on the doorstep of his father, and he's already worked it out to plead his case, to prove to his father to allow him to get back into the house. In other words, I'm not good enough anymore to be your son. Just make me a worker and that'll be good enough. Have you ever had those thoughts run through your own head? There are two things that I'm going to talk to you about this morning. I might as well just give you the preface real quick. And I think that they afflict the church. One is the orphan spirit, and I'll go ahead and write it up here. I was going to do it later on, but I might as well. Number two is the religious spirit. That S is not capitalized. I just wrote it really big. I'm sorry. It's not. It's like talking about our spirit, not the spirit, just in case everyone like miniaturize it. There you go. There it is. And another way of talking about the religious spirit is a mentality. Why am I saying mentality over and over again? Because what a stronghold is a mentality. And I believe the church deals with two strongholds that come against them. Both are predicated on performance. Both are dealing with trying to perform to show how good we are. And one is found in the place that's called the orphan spirit or the orphan mentality, and the other one is found in the religious spirit or the religious mentality. Listen to me. You do not cast out strongholds, you pull them down. You cast out demons. You don't cast out flesh, you kill it. You don't cast out strongholds. You don't cast out mindsets. You pull them down and exalt the mindset of Christ over top of it. Okay? So in dealing with the orphan spirit, the orphan mentality, this is what I love about the God. I mean, you could say so many different things. But this is what I love about the Father, specifically the Father, because this is who Jesus has come to reveal in this moment. This is This is pre-death and resurrection. And he's already giving a picture of the heart of the Father. Because the law will bring death, but the heart of God draws you into relationship. The letter of the law, the spirit of the law, the reverse, just comparing the two. And we look at this and we see this is the mentality of the younger brother. He was repenting. Everyone say repenting. That's good. He was contrite. He had contrition. He was broken. That's good, but he still had a heart issue. He did not understand the heart of the Father toward him. He thought he had to prove something to give him worth. His worth was never found in his performance. His worth was found in his pedigree. He's a son. And as you don't work for an inheritance, you receive it by default of being in the family. And so he shows up with this, I don't really have a dad anymore. I got to perform for him in order to be accepted by him. Thought process. And this is what I love about the response. I've already talked. I could preach forever on all this. I love this. This is like huge to me. I've already talked about it. I don't want to belabor it too much. But I love the response of the Father in the midst of this. Luke 15, 20 through 24 says, while he was still a long way off, this is the younger brother, his father saw him and felt compassion for him. What? His father saw him and felt compassion for him and ran and embraced and kissed him. This is how I know that that son had an orphan mentality. Because the father has already run to him. The father has already treated him like a son. The father has already kissed him. The father has already embraced him. And he's still trying to give the pitch to convince the father that he's worthy. To quote the great philosopher, that's what we would call cray-cray. It's just, it doesn't make sense. Because the father has already treated him as a son. But he still has the mentality of, I don't deserve, I don't deserve. Let me just clear up everything. None of us deserve. None of us deserve. His love paved the way for us to be with him. If it were predicated and based upon our efforts, none of us are good enough. That's the whole point of Jesus. He's good enough. And out of his good enough, he makes us good enough and acceptable. Not so that you are just privileged as if you've got a tiptoe around the Father. You have the right to boldly approach the throne of grace with confidence. What is that talking about? It's this. Family can walk in on family and it's okay. If you are a servant or a subject and you go into the king's courts, you're going to die. If you are not invited, you're done. You're done. But if you are family, you have a right to go boldly, meaning that you don't have to have fear in approaching your father. You get to come to him because he's dad. This is breaking the orphan spirit off of people. What is it? It's breaking off rejection by the spirit of adoption. You have been adopted into the family. That means all of the inheritance of the kingdom is yours. Do you see that? You will judge angels one day. Do you understand? We have such a vision problem because we don't understand who we are in him yet. We have a pretty decent picture of who God is, but we don't realize completely what he has done in us yet because we base it upon our behaviors rather than upon his behaviors. Listen, if you are living in sin, there is freedom for you. If you are bound to sin, there is freedom for you. But your acceptance to him was never based on your performance. It was based on his for you. You are living below what he has paid for you to do. But it's because you have not yet got the revelation of how he has brought you into his marvelous light. Does that make sense? Yeah, I'm not trying to be ugly or anything here. I'm trying to maybe awaken inside of us the understanding that his goodness is enough for you. And so dad runs. Dad runs to his younger son. That would be shameful in their day. Dad, to speak in the greatest eloquent words that I can think, Dad don't care. Dad doesn't care because the optics are not nearly as important as the relationship. Oh, we could learn a thing or two from that. I listened to this thing, and of all the people, I'm sorry, you'll never watch this, so it doesn't matter. This guy named Bono, have you ever heard of him? He sings. He's all right. I love him. I love his voice back in the day for sure. And there's this version, like he's kind of gotten a bad rap on different things that he believes, but this man actually believes in Jesus, follows the Lord, and has been radically impacted by a man named Eugene Peterson. Are you familiar? He's written a book called The Pastor. It's exceptional. And there was a video that I watched of Eugene Peterson and Bono coming together, you know, because their worlds are so closely linked. And they're having conversations about the Lord. And Bono says something that catches my attention. He says this, I do not like Christian art because I find it to be disingenuous. They will not be honest about what they are going through. That stuck out to me. Do you know why? Because so very often, the optics of what surround what's happening in us are more important than the relationship that's being hurt in the process. We need to get to a place of honesty where we understand that family can be vulnerable and it's okay. You can't, listen, to trust everyone is ridiculous. The Bible says Jesus entrusted his heart to no man. So in that regard, I'm not advocating ignorance, or I'm not advocating setting yourself up for failure. But what I am saying is we need to get past the thing that we are constantly putting out that we're perfect and don't have any issues. Because we do. And as long as we pretend that we don't, we're never actually going to deal with them. This is what I love about this story, because this brother finally came to the end of his rope, and he said, he came to his senses, is what the Bible said. He said, I can't do this on my own. He still had an issue. He still had an issue that he hadn't recognized. But he knew enough to know it's better with Dad. And so he returns home, and he starts to try to be honest in the way that he knows, but he's still covering up some stuff. And you know what? This is what I love about the Father. The Father took him anyway. He didn't have to be perfect to come. He just had to be willing to come. And so he shows up to the Father, and this is one of my favorite things in the whole story, is that the son, after he kisses him, the son starts to go into this the spiel that he's already prepared. He says, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. And the Father stops him. Literally, it's like I can see, I don't know how you guys, I see things visually. Like I'm a visual storyteller in my mind. And so I see the Father like while he's talking on the, no, shh. This is what you're doing. This is what I want you to do. Like I see the Father shutting him down. And he goes, no. You don't, in other words, he doesn't have to say a word, but you don't need to give me the speech to convince me. I already accept you. So he shuts him down and he looks at the servants and he says, quickly. He does several things. He says, bring out the best robe, put it on him, put a ring on his hand and the sandals on his feet. Bring the fatted calf, kill it. Let us eat and celebrate, for this son of mine was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found. And they began to celebrate. In a matter of moments, this is what the Father restores: identity, authority, and dignity. puts the best robe on him. That's saved for the favorite child. Usually it's the father's robe. That's your identity. You don't have to relate to being a slave. You relate to being my son. Number one. Number two, puts the ring on, the signet ring, the thing that held the crest of their family. Authority. Sandals on his feet. Slaves don't wear sandals. Sons do. That's dignity. Kills the fatted calf. Fatted calves are for dignitaries and for people of high value and importance. Remember that point. Kills it for him. Deuteronomy 21:18 through 21 says, and I'll just paraphrase to tell you what it encapsulates for the sake of time. The disrespectful son should have been stoned to death for his actions, but the father welcomed him home. The love of the father gave his son a feast instead of a funeral. How many times have we gone to the father expecting to get some level of punishment and death when he really just wants to lavish his love on us and bring us into restoration? Gave him a feast instead of a funeral. That's a good deal. Why? Why did that happen? One word, Jesus. See, in the Old Testament, when you're just dealing with law, you're dealing with the blood of bulls and goats and sheep and what have you. In the New Testament, you're dealing with the blood of the everlasting Son. That was the Lamb of God slain from the foundations of the world. And he's paved a way for the heart of the Father to be able to be expressed to you, so that because one time, one for all, one sacrifice, and that's it, and the love of the Father is able to be lavished on you. It has always been the intention of the Father to lavish his love on his children. It has always been his intention. Sin stood in the way. Jesus dealt with it permanently. You with me? Okay. So, they threw a party and they celebrated. Everything the younger son went out into the world looking for, he found was already in his dad's house. He just didn't have the right perspective when he was there. He needed eyes open to be able to see. So the prodigal son traded slavery for restoration. Say this with me. Adoption brought authority and access. Adoption brought authority and access. Authority to represent the Father. Guess what you have? You can say it. That's perfectly fine. Matthew 28:18 through 20, Jesus says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. He turns to his disciples and he says, therefore go. What's he saying? I'm giving you the authority to go and represent me to the world. Jesus came to represent the Father to us. He is the express, exact representation of the Father. He then empowered his followers to represent him, who's a representation of the Father, to the world. So what is the prodigal son getting by coming back into the fold in the family? Number one, he's going from death to life. Number two, sonship is restored. Number three, he has authority to represent the Father now because the ring's on his finger. Number four, he has access to all that is afforded to the family name because he's a son, not a slave. Well, that's the mystery of the kingdom, isn't it? You're both a son and a slave. It really is. Adoption breaks off the fear of rejection. Pedigree breaks off performance and acceptance. And that's dealing with the orphan spirit. Let's look really quickly at the religious spirit. Everyone say, ouch and oh me. Here we go. Now his older son was in the field. He's out working. And when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. Music and dancing? And he summoned one of the servants. He has no problem with his role in knowing that people are under him. Summoned one of the servants and began inquiring what these things could be. In other words, what's going on and why are they celebrating without me? And the servant said to him, your brother has come. Oh, the joyful news that every older sibling loves to hear. How many people have like an older brother or sister in this room? Raise your hand. So you've lived this message, you know. Oh, the joys. The one good thing about being a younger sibling in the house for the older kids is that there's always someone to blame for what you do. I think that this guy might be a little ticked off because the younger brother left and he was like, there's nobody else to put it on. So, he summoned one of the servants and began inquiring what's going on. He told him that his brother has come back. The fattened calf, this is important. Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has received him back safe and sound. And it says, the brother became angry and was not willing to go into the house. And you go, why is that? Who's the fattened calf kept for? Special people. Dignitaries. Right? The highest of the high. Right? Now, I want you to think back right now to the original audience, because I don't think this would be lost on the Pharisees and the scribes. So, in their mind, they're already picking up on the fact that Jesus is saying that God the Father has killed the fattened calf for the tax collectors and the sinners, and that the Pharisees are out in the field not being able to join in the party. Yeah, making friends and influencing people. Let me tell you, I love Jesus. You want to talk about boldness? Oh, well, no time. We'll move on. So, killed the fatted calf because he had received him back safe and sound. He's angry, he won't go in. We often focus just on this. But let me tell you something. The elder brother has a heart issue. The elder brother has a major heart issue. It's called jealousy and anger. Jealousy and anger. And let me say it a different way. When you're dealing with the orphan spirit and the religious spirit, let me say it a different way. One approaches God through a place of poverty. The other one approaches God through a place of pride. The orphan spirit sits in poverty and says, I'm not good enough. The religious spirit sits in judgment and says, they're not good enough. And so here's the older brother getting angry, and his pride is keeping him from joining in the party. I'm not going in there and celebrating. He wasted all that money. He wasted all the inheritance. By the way, just to let you know where I have it listed. It's in here somewhere. So I'm going to quote it because it's obviously somewhere else. When you go to the book of Deuteronomy, you notice that the elder brother always receives a double portion of the inheritance. So this guy didn't, it says the father divided the inheritance between them both. Right? So the younger son got his inheritance, the older son also got, and his inheritance was twice what the younger son was, but still he's complaining about what the younger son got. Let that marinate for a second. He's jealous over what somebody else has because in the moment, that which squandered is receiving grace from the Father and being treated as royalty, and he's mad over it, even though he's received way more than this guy ever has. Have you ever had a situation where you were in a lull in your life and you started to see somebody else receive blessing that you deemed wasn't worth it? Remember I said that honesty thing, that vulnerable thing? Everyone say, ouch. Everyone say, oh me. Say it like I do, oh me. Thank you. I knew I could trust you, Todd. I knew I could trust you. Let's have a showing of hands. If you have ever been in here and you have looked at somebody and you have said, what about me? I didn't have to wait. Because of, if I could like, get both up there, like seriously, where we have had the, what? I can tell you, I raised both of my hands because this is so me about 10 years ago. No, probably more recent than that. Probably about 5 or 6 years ago. Maybe like 20 minutes ago. No, okay, maybe too far. Like, I remember looking at someone and I was like, they are getting blessing upon blessing upon blessing upon blessing upon blessing. And I am living in a 2-bedroom apartment as a grown man who has served in ministry for 13 years, giving my lifeblood for the kingdom. And I looked, and I'll never forget, I looked at my wife and I said, what's the deal? Anyone can relate to that? What on earth? What? And you can see the thought bubbles going up like, and like mystification as to why not me? Right? What we have forgotten is that we are not looking at the history of our own story where the Lord has provided all along the way. And we're living in the moment, and we really are adapting an attitude of what have you done for me lately rather than looking at all the things that he has done for us. That's the spirit of the elder brother. That's what religion will do. Relationship will break that off. But that's what religion will do. So, let's look at this. I love this. He's angry. He's not willing to go in. His pride robbed him of the party. Oh, the response of the father, and this is where everyone needs to really say, ouch, you know me. It says, and the father came out of the house and began pleading with the elder brother to come in. Somehow along the way, we made, like the Pharisees, the enemy. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where we looked at people and said the disciples are the good guys and the Pharisees are the evil ones. Jesus loved the Pharisees just as much as he loved his disciples. And to think differently towards that is to miss the point. The spirit that was driving them was the enemy, not the people. God the Father left the house to go to the elder brother that was in judgment of the younger brother and pleaded with him, you come into the house too and join the party. Because he loved him. He wants everyone. If you think that he just wants the sinners and the tax collectors and the Pharisees and the scribes are the enemy of the story that he's trying to get rid of, you miss the heart of the Father. Jesus was after all of them. He loved all of them to the point when he was sitting, and it literally says in Scripture that the teachers of the law showed up to trap him. And he said, what is the greatest commandment? To love your Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. And the teacher said this. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the teacher said, no, you're right in answering what you said. You have said correctly. What does Jesus say to him? You're not far from the kingdom. Because even though he was there to try to trip Jesus up, to try to make him look like a fool and discredit him, when he recognized the truth that Jesus had spoken, Jesus basically endorsed inside of him that revelation and said, you're beginning to see. Because his purpose was to lead them into the knowledge of the Father, not to exclude them as if they are the enemy. And so God the Father goes outside to the elder brother just as much as he went outside for the younger brother. And he pleads with him. But here's the difference. See the attitude of the elder brother. He answers and says to the father, look, for so many years I have been serving you, and I have never neglected a command of yours. Yeah. Liar. Like, come on. You ever get in that self-righteous mode? I'm so much better than they are. No. A little bit of rose-colored glasses going on. For so many years I've been serving you, and I've never neglected a command of yours, and yet you have never given me a young goat. He gave him double portion in the inheritance. How quickly we forget. So that I might celebrate with my friends. What's he saying? I've done everything right. I've performed for you, and I've done it all well. Why didn't you honor me with this? It's still performance. It's just from a position of pride rather than poverty. It's not, I don't deserve, it's I do deserve because I've done. People, your righteousness, like my righteousness, is like filthy rags before him. Nothing we do is good enough on our own. That's why we needed Jesus. If we get into the place where we start to say, I've done it all and I'm good, and trust me, all of us, including this pastor, have. All of us have. But if we get into that mode and stay into that mode, we are emulating the elder brother. And we're operating in pride with the assumption as if we in ourselves are good enough that God should bless us. He has a heart issue, and it needs to be healed. I love, listen to this, you know it's bad when this happens. He says, you've never given me anything that I might celebrate with my friends, but when this son of yours came home, it's always a good way to start a message, or a conversation. When you people, no, don't start anything like that. When this son of yours came who has devoured your wealth, and starts to bring the accusations of the things that he has done, with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him. Why didn't you honor me like you honored him? He did. He gave him a double portion. The difference is he was still in the house. And the other brother left and had to be celebrated. And this is what the father says. Now here's what I love about this, and this is the perspective that we need to break off. That son of yours, this is what I love how the father says it. This is what he says in response. The father says to the elder brother, son, you have always been with me, and all that is mine is yours. You too are living thinking that you don't understand what has been afforded to you. See, the younger brother came back to the house to find that everything that he was looking for was present the whole time. The elder brother lived in the house and didn't realize what he had access to. We need to know who we are. Son, you have always been with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice for this brother of yours. See, the father points out right relationship. That spirit, that religious mentality that puts us on a pedestal where we think that we are better, looks and says, that son of yours, not recognizing the relationship that is shared between brother to brother. That son of yours, no. The father rightly says, your brother. Not just my son, your brother. Because even though he was estranged and he was at a lower quote-unquote class setting and they were at a higher quote-unquote class setting, they're still related as family. Welcome to the kingdom of God. And so he says, this brother of yours was dead. And now we had to celebrate. And he has begun to live and was lost and has been found. If the elder brother had kept perfectly all of the commands of the father, then he would have loved the son like the father loved the son when he returned. What he had adapted to was following rules and neglecting relationship. And the kingdom is all about relationship. It's about family. It's meant to be family. We have a bunch of nuts and flakes in our family. That's okay. That's okay. If you're a part of the fruit and nut clan, that's perfectly fine. We are all going to be surprised when we get to heaven and we look and we go, you made it? It's going to mystify us that we're like, man, we had this conversation earlier today. We were like, you made it? Yeah, you made it. Oh, they let you in? Oh, I've got a pretty good seat by the throne, by the way. Yeah. Seriously. We're so judgmental and trying to settle everybody else's stuff when we're supposed to be looking at our own. Isn't that what the whole idea behind the plank and the speck that was being taught? But here's the deal. And that whole story of deal with the speck in your own eye so that you will see clearly to deal with the plank in somebody else's eye is this very thing in dealing with this. It's deal with this speck in your eye that sets ourselves up with a prideful position, and then you will actually see the way that the Father sees, so that when you go to correct somebody, you do it in love and not out of a place of judgment. That's kingdom. That's Jesus. Can I get an amen?